Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM Channel 141. This is the Insight segment. I'm Harold Fisher. We are at the Reporters Sports Roundtable tonight with the top stories of the week. My guests are sports journalist Kelsey Nicole Nelson, Chris Murray, host of the Chris Murray Report out of Philadelphia, and author of First Draft, a collection of stories chronicling race, sports, and social justice, and Howard University professor and sports journalist Darren Snyder. Welcome to the show, everybody. Chris, thank you for being on the program first time. We've got a lot to talk about. It's been a really, really busy week. I want to first start with the RFK Stadium deal. Now, we actually talked about it yesterday on our program from a political standpoint, but really, Kelsey, this could very well be one of the biggest sports stories in 2025, unless something crazy happens during the football season, which it usually does, or the baseball season, for example, or the WNBA or whatever. But just your thoughts about even the recent developments. This is so much closer today than it was the day before yesterday.
You're so right. Well, first off, Harold, thank you for having me on the program. And I will tell you, it's a lot of, I'll say, happy hearts in Washington, D.C. And though we know not the full city is standing behind it, it was great to see Mayor Muriel Bowser just yesterday, right? Had the rally behind her, had one of the super fans, Tailgate Ted, introducing her to say, look, DC, like, we're still working hard for this to happen. There is a lot of native Washingtonians, who want this team back in Washington, DC. We thought when that July 15th deadline first hit, Harold, that maybe it was over. Maybe we were going back and trying to make FedEx Field look a little bit sexier and more attractive, even though a lot of people wanted to leave Maryland after all of the people that have complaints for so long, right? Northwest Stadium now out in Landover. But all that to say, I have to give proper naming rights, Chris. Right. But all that to say, I think what Mayor Bowser is doing, I know we'll have a public hearing coming up, right? July 28th and 29th. So it's still a moving piece in part, but it just feels like one step closer to bringing the team back. And I know there are a lot of other things that we'll talk about on the show surrounding the team, including the name that has been back in the headlines, we'll say. Obviously, training camp has also put a lot out there. But all in all to say, I think, especially with the success of this team right now, there's a lot of folks who want, fight for old DC. They want that camaraderie back, Harold. They want that excitement back in Washington, DC. And I think Mayor Bowser knows this would be a huge credit on her resume if she is able to successfly get this done.
Yeah. So, what do you think? I mean, I think you're absolutely right. And suffice it to say, as was brought up yesterday, we are talking about a Black woman as a chief executive officer who was able to, so far, keep or bring back the Washington Commanders to D.C. We had a new stadium with Nats Park, or newer, relatively speaking. And of course, what's happening, with the Capitals. And she says she wants DC to be a sports destination, Chris. It looks like that is happening.
Yeah, it's welcome. I mean, first of all, as the visiting, reporter coming into Northwest Stadium, it is the worst place to get into. I have to leave my home in Delaware, or when I was living in Philadelphia. I have to leave at about maybe 7 o'clock in the morning just to get through traffic. It is the worst place in the world. I don't know why they built it over there on Central Avenue in that whole area. I have no idea. Plus, I remember when the Washington football team, and I'm saying this out of tribute to Butch McAdams, the late Butch McAdams, but when they were in Washington at RFK, there was an edge that Washington had. They lost that edge moving out to FedEx. I mean, it was just something about the fans. It's almost like in Philadelphia, you can't move the Eagles outside of South Philly because there's the edge that city fans have. The one thing I'll say for Baltimore, DC, and Philly is that you have rabid fans. And I think that and they don't have to, and they should not go back to Redskins, by the way. But from that standpoint, I think that I hope they put it back in the city. I think it would mean jobs for a lot of people live in those areas and whatnot, because there's a lot of jobs that are associated with football. and all that. And it would be a lot easier to get to, via the subway system in Washington, which I think is one of the best in the nation. And it'll just be easier to get to for fans because, most of the time to go way out to Northwest Stadium, that drive out there, even for people who live there, is a pain in the rear end.
Yeah. All right, so okay.
Darren.
All right. So first of all, a couple things. One, you left out New York on that whole I-95 corridor. So
all right. I forgot New York. Yeah. You right. I can't argue that.
Other thing is, you put a little respect on Prince George's County's name, all right? So FedEx Field is not the best field in the NFL. Matter of fact, it's often ranks near the bottom when they ask players about the field. Now, I don't know what time you try to get there, but when, it's about 20-minute drive from my house. When I was going there every home game, I was in and out pretty easily. So maybe you need to leave a little earlier. You know what I'm saying?
That's what I did. But that's what I did.
Calling you out, Chris.
Right, so, no, I'm not.
But you know what, though? It's inconvenient. If it has too much traffic on 495, and I lived in PG County. I have no different.
Yeah, it was pretty convenient. It's pretty convenient for me, but that's just me. Anyway, no doubt, they call RFK the spiritual home. I can understand that, and I can understand why a lot of people want it back in the city. Clearly. But I'm so glad that the council did not just say, hey, this deal is great, because Mayor Bowser kind of like just, you giving them all the parking revenue, all of it was not a good deal for the city the way it was. So the council has said, all right, let's do some negotiating. And I think when they get to the end of it, they'll get some revenue that they weren't going to get in the initial deal. So all in all, except for the people, people who worry about housing and all of that, yeah, probably that's not the best use of the land. However, money rules everything around us, so that's what's going to happen. And you mentioned the jobs. Football stadium's not like an arena, right? Arena's going to have 80 nights a year and all these other things. Football stadium pretty much is the worst financial investment. However, it's football, it's the NFL, so we go for it anyway.
But what about concerts? I mean, years ago, I still remember the Chocolate Jam with Parliament Funkadelic and them at RFK. I mean, there's gonna be opportunities for concerts, and you'll be renting, the stadium out. From that perspective. So
yeah, and you know what? And let me say this, because if you really think about it, Chris does make an excellent point. No matter how many football games are going to be there,
right.
Beyonce was just.
It's not that many, bro. When the Canadians rolled out some huge number of events that they envision, you look at stadiums like, this is going to have a roof, but if you look at other stadiums, NFL stadiums, they don't have like 100 things during the year. But
I guess my point is that it's not just going to be football,
but it's a handful.
Okay, go ahead, Kelsey, real quick.
To Darren's point, remember the whole thing, the opponents on the council, the whole thing they were pushing is this to be used as a mixed-use development, right? So to Darren's point, he said it earlier, affordable housing. We're talking about businesses. The DC Chamber of Commerce has also been very involved in these conversations. The police chief, Pamela A. Smith, was on that platform next to Muriel Bowser. So we're also talking about safety and security, right? Making that area more safe. So all that to say, I think there's been different items that DC has pushed to make this happen. It's just, like you said, going back to with the money, the Commanders had to make the money, right? That $3.7 billion price tag, because DC residents, and all of us probably have lived in DC at one point in our lives, it's expensive to live here, and residents just didn't want to pay that. But again, they're pushing it as a mixed-use stadium development. I do think we need to push that, because they're saying it's going to be used for multiple things other than just one of our favorite things, football Sundays.
But come on, Stan Kroenke out in Los Angeles, he built his joint with not near a dime of public money, and the Cats with the Golden State Warriors, they ain't take no public money anyway. Josh Harris got about $1 billion or whatever, but fine. We gonna give him 1-point-something billion, the second largest ever subsidy for a public state. Fine, okay, build the stadium, take the money.
What's DC gonna get? I mean, your mayor has to negotiate something.
The council is negotiating.
Well, the council is negotiating, and again,
back
that's what
to it.
happened yesterday. Phil Mendelson, the chair of the DC Council, he did some shuffling and came up with what he believes is a better deal. Arguably, it is better than the deal that the mayor had originally negotiated, but we still have 1 week before the first vote. There will be two, but 1 week before the first vote, 1 week from today. And then the second one is September 17th. And we're going to hear a lot from people, as Kelsey said, next week. Let me move on to this other issue.
It's going to happen.
I believe that it probably will. Yeah, but you know how it is.
Out of it for DC. That's you gotta negotiate that too.
Yeah.
Well, he said we were talking about $949 million over the 30-year deal, but there were a lot of numbers yesterday. A lot of numbers.
Never believe those numbers when they talk about what it's going to do.
They're going to shift. We definitely know that. Let's move on to this other topic, which is really also critical. And this is President Trump had said that he was going to scuttle this deal if the Commanders don't change the name back to Redskins, but he also mentioned the Cleveland Guardians and them becoming the Cleveland Indians again. We can say this is part of the Epstein distraction, but that was yesterday's conversation. Just from a sports perspective, Kelsey, your thoughts about both of those threats to change,
Yeah, this is coming from the president who released the executive order, right, that's saying he's saving collegiate sports. Most recently, the same president that has also talked about having UFC on the White House lawns, right? And the same president who we heard from the press secretary said this is not a joke, right? And has called him, quote, a non-traditional president. So I want to set that there. I think all this to say, I think President Trump likes to keep himself busy and in the news, and he's doing exactly just that at a time when we shouldn't even be talking about this Commander's name change, right? We're going back to 2020, right, when this name change first happened. Washington football team first. I worked for the team when they were the Washington football team. So I was with the team when this name change process happened to now the Washington Commanders. And we're talking about, let's be honest, we've been talking about not using the name Redskins since about like 1972-ish when it first came up. I've had members of the Blackfeet Nation on my show dating back to 2017 talking about this issue. And also, let's be honest, members of the Blackfeet Nation who were once employed by the then Washington Redskins team. So we always know there's been two sides to this. To me, this is a president who's not been afraid to use derogatory terms for any groups, ethnic groups, or anybody who has said they feel offended by things. So I was not surprised. But again, I think the timing of it is very convenient for him and his side of things, Harold, going back to your conversation yesterday with all of the things kind of surrounding him and people kind of looking to pry into his background as we talk more and more about this Epstein case. I do think it's like a smoke screen. It's a blue screen. I think real football fans just want this team to be good. They're looking at Jaden Daniels today. They're hearing reports out of training camp that maybe it wasn't his best day, but they want the football team to move forward. I think the Commanders just need to move forward with this new ownership group, this name that's there. And again, just focus on winning football. I think this is just yet another big smoke screen distraction from our commander-in-chief.
Darren, real quick before I go to the break, your thoughts about that?
Well, I agree with what Kelsey said. Fortunately, it doesn't look like we can't take anything for granted with this guy because so many people down the line are falling in line with him. I know the team has to do some negotiating with the Interior Department, so hopefully he won't corrupt that deal. But it's ridiculous. Like so much that comes out of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue nowadays. No one is clamoring for this. And interestingly enough, when President Obama said, when he was in office, and he said that if he was the owner, he would consider changing it from the R slur word, Donald Trump was like, oh, president shouldn't be getting involved in what a team's name is. That's wrong, yada, yada, yada. Now here he is doing the same thing. But surprise, surprise, hypocritical, ridiculous, irrational, infantile. Oh my goodness.
You're doing good. I need to take a break. But hold on, because Chris, I want your opinion about this, and we have much, much more to talk about as well. Don't forget, you can hear this and every edition of the Daily Drum Insight segment via podcast on WHUR.com. The original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon is next on WHUR. This conversation continues on Sirius XM channel 141 and 96.3 HD2 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our conversation at the Sports Roundtable. My guests are sports journalist Kelsey Nicole Nelson, Chris Murray, host of the Chris Murray Report out of Philadelphia and author of First Draft, a collection of stories chronicling race, sports, and social justice, and Howard University professor and sports journalist Darren Snyder. Chris, before the break, I wanted to make sure I got your take on the Redskins Commanders name issue and the Guardians Indians name thing, because these things kind of came up at the same time when you're talking about Cleveland's baseball team.
I don't think it should happen, but it's reflective of one thing. He wants to take people of color back in a variety of ways, and a lot of them aren't good. So I think that this is a time, they need to tell Trump no and take it to court if they have to. Because the more and more he brings stuff, I think Trump is throwing stuff out there. You take the bait, you either capitulate or you stand up. And the more he does it, the more, he's going to be emboldened to do other things. And so from that standpoint, to me, it's a distraction from the Epstein situation, but it's reflective of the racist and bigot that he is.
Yeah. Let me go to another really key point. And this is probably the second biggest story when it comes to sports in the DMV. Kelsey, is Terry still going to be scary for the Commanders or are we going to have to be scared for him somewhere else?
Oh, you are stepping on toes right now, Harold. This is the biggest story right now, I'd say, in Washington, D.C.
Yes.
I said this on shows all week. Old money ain't new money, and Terry wants some of that new money. He's looking at top receivers getting about $30 million per year. He's looking at the latest contract signed by wide receivers. Right, he's looking at DK Metcalf, he's looking at T. Higgins, and Terry's saying, "Hey, look, I know I'm about to turn 30 in September, but I've produced for this team since I was drafted for this team, and been the most consistent person for this team, and people looking for him to build." So, I do think the Commanders, it's great to hear Dan Quinn say we understand it's business. We love Adam Peters, saying he's valued in this building, but Terry has shown us he's standing on business, not attending training camp, and wanting to get paid. And let's remember, this is a guy who's been All Pro, a Pro Bowler, a captain of this team. A voice for this team. He's built his family here, right? Just getting married here. So all that to say, I think if the Commanders can come correct, he still will be. But I think Terry's realizing the time is ticking for him as a wide receiver, and the time is now more than ever for him to get paid for what he's been able to show. The proof is in the pudding. So we'll see if the Commanders can talk business with him.
So from a fan's perspective and someone who is not necessarily an insider, why is this happening?
It's business. When you're getting toward contract time, you want to re-up. And, the business is cruel because they're looking at you, well, you're a little bit older and you might not be worth what you think you are. And he's like, no, I'm worth exactly what these other guys are getting. So I don't think there's anything for fans to be worried about. I'm sure that they will get a deal done. And Terry's doing what he's supposed to do. He's holding out for what he's worth, and he's going to make the Commanders come up to that point. And if they don't, then he can bounce. He'll go somewhere else and get respected. But I don't think the Redskins. I said the Redskins.
See, there you go.
He's got Trump in his head.
Yeah, blame it on me because I brought the issue up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to let that happen. They're negotiating. It's a part of holdouts, a part of the NFL. And he's missing training camp. There's a bonus for that for him. So, it's nothing to worry about, I don't think.
But when you talk about, Chris, when you talk about older players, they just picked up Von Miller for 1 year.
1 year. That's different.
I understand that, but Von Miller is a pass rusher. Aren't you proud of me, Kelsey? I even know that. But but he's a pass rusher. Come on.
That's a good signing. That's a
No,
good
I
step.
agree.
It's a good sign for what they need. But I'm going to tell you something about Terry McLaurin. He deserves this money.
Absolutely.
He has been successful despite a myriad of bad quarterbacks, bad coaches, and all that.
Bad ownership.
Yeah, and he has not caught less than 58 passes in his career. This guy has 1,000-yard seasons. He's one of the best. Philadelphia Eagles, Baltimore Ravens, anybody that has played the Washington Commanders, the first thing you look at, what about Terry McLaurin? And like I said, even when the Commanders have had bad quarterbacks and whatnot, Kirk Cousins and all that other stuff, that guy has excelled. As Deion Sanders say, pay that man. Pay that man. They have to pay him.
You call Kirk Cousins a bad quarterback?
You like that? You like that?
Hey,
he was all right.
He was all right.
He's all right.
He's all right.
All right. And here's the other thing. And like I said, I am the only, non-sports expert in this conversation. But Terry McLaurin is an excellent football player. But there is something to be said also for the other side of the business, which means there are some people who will show up and pay top dollar for ticket prices, not just to see Jayden Daniels, but to see Terry McLaurin.
Of course, JD5 needs somebody to throw the ball to, and Terry McLaurin is usually the one catching that ball. I mean, y'all, he's coming off a career year, right, in touchdown catches. Like, Terry McLaurin has done his job, and I think he's saying, like, we kind of know him as, I'd say, a lot of fans know him, I'd say, as the nice guy, right? And any fella can allude to this. Being the nice guy will only take you so far. Now he's being the business guy on the football field and saying, look, I do love y'all, but I've proven myself. There's nothing else left for me. And let's remember, the Commanders, you would think, have really been trying to build around him, right? You bring in Deebo Samuel, right, to complement, right, that offense. You look at what they've done on the offensive line. Noah Brown being healthy, a great sign back. So I mean, he's a very important piece. If the Commanders, I think, want to leave off on where they left off last season, and if we are talking, Mayor Bowser said it yesterday, I'm talking about a Super Bowl in DC, I think Terry McLaurin could be an important piece about that. Just to give, another accolade, another older player highly being talked about in the National Football League right now in Kansas City is Travis Kelce. Now, tight end, but older tight end. Coach Andy Reid cannot stop praising him, Harold. So I'm not to say like all age is not the same, right? There are certain guys who keep up with themselves. You brought up Von Miller. He's another one. He talked about in his press conference needing to stay away from all the DC food scenes so he can keep himself right. He said that's probably going to be his hardest battle. So I say that to say, like, Terry McLaurin has done his job. The Commanders now need
him half smokes alone from Ben's Chili Bowl. Don't go to Ben's Chili Bowl looking for half smoke.
Yeah, but also, Kelly, I mean, Kelsey, the other thing is, in all seriousness, I think, even if Travis Kelce were to retire, I think he can get $5 or $10 from his girlfriend. So I think he'll be just fine. Let me move on to the next story. And this one kind of came a little bit, out of nowhere for me, where Ravens coach John Harbaugh, after a visit to the Oval Office and seeing President Trump, he was asked about that visit where, and I'll just quote, what he said. He was asked about the visit to the Oval Office, considering that President Trump back in 2019 had some really horrible things to say about Baltimore. And his response was, and here's the quote, how you framed that question, I would have framed that question like, you got a chance to go visit the president, man. What was that experience like? It was amazing. It was awesome. And I promise you, I root for our president. I want our president to be successful, just like I want my quarterback to be successful and I want my team to be successful. And it was an amazing experience. Kelsey, was he kind of straddling the fence and trying to get out of the politics of it, or what? Because unless somebody else knows, I am not aware of John Harbaugh's politics at all.
Yeah. I mean, let's be honest. A lot of football coaches and owners, they try to keep the politics out of it, even though you usually know where they stand. Let me say this. The Baltimore Ravens have an award-winning public relations team, and I think John Harbaugh was coached very well. It was a very political answer, and you're trying to compare President Trump to your quarterback, Lamar Jackson, who was beloved, not just in the city of Baltimore, right? Lamar Jackson is one of the top athletes for, players love him, scouts love him. I mean, young kids love him. Who doesn't love Lamar Jackson? But all that to say, first of all, shout out to the Baltimore Banner reporter that asked this question. It was a hard question to ask. And I think Coach Harbaugh did kind of try to attack him on answering that, but he's trying to paint himself as patriotic. I know Jim Harbaugh also answered, his brother also answered the question, saying it's great to have all nine of our family members there in the White House. My problem, though, with Coach Harbaugh, again, is, like you said, knowing that you're in Baltimore. I'll be in Baltimore later today, actually covering the Orioles. To be in a city like Baltimore, that you've been in a long time now, to hear President Trump's comments back to 2019, calling, like you said, rat and rodent infested. I think that was just disrespectful to the people of Baltimore, a blue collar city who pay money for these games. And especially like if you say, you don't want to really be political and stuff like that, that was a political action. That was a political move. I would have liked him, honestly, to be honest, if you support, President Trump, openly, I would have just liked to hear him say that. Don't try to, make it, again, a PR answer that, again, was well crafted. Props to the Ravens, team that I think helps him on that. But yeah, I just didn't like the answer. And I think, honestly, people see Harold now where he does stand with the president, who has said a lot of controversial things, since the second time around that he's now, been in office. And again, a president that was openly outspoken against going back to his first term about, the Black Lives Matter movement, again, a stance that players have had thoughts on and comments on and things like that. So all that to say, I think when people show you who they are, believe them the first time, to quote Maya Angelou. I think we all know now where the Harbaugh brothers stand.
See, Chris, this is the question that I wanted to ask you about this for context, because Black people who are not fans of Donald Trump and are once again looking at how politics has intersected with sports, they may say, well, Harbaugh shouldn't do this, leave politics out of it. But to be quite honest, for Black people, politics, social justice, and sports has always intersected. Colin Kaepernick, Muhammad Ali, Joe Louis. I mean, what's your thoughts about looking at both sides of this?
Well, on the one hand, I think you got to be aware of the optics. You got a team that's mostly Black players in a city that is mostly Black. And Baltimore, and I'm a native, I was insulted by that as a native Baltimorean. And, I don't particularly, at least I'll agree with Kelsey. I at least know where he stands, and all that. And, he better take my team to the Super Bowl with Lamar Jackson. But my thing at the end of the day, he needs to be aware of the optics because, first of all, I was in Philly when Malcolm Jenkins was there and refused to go to the White House. And I will always respect the stand that he took. But I just think that there are a lot of players on that team who have relatives who are going to be affected by Trump's policies. And I don't think it was a good look at all. I understand he's trying to straddle the fence, be a good American. But, part of Trump being a good American is basically putting us back to 1955 or 1896. That's where Trump is. And to me, it's just a bad thing. I hope it doesn't interfere with how he coaches the team. But, there are a lot of Black players who look at him saying, yeah, I see you, bro. That's all I can say. I see where you are.
Darren?
He probably didn't. Well, I don't know if he realized what it sounds like when he says, I want our president to be successful. Because then, we're like, successful at what? Like if he's in his mind, he might be saying, I want the country to be successful, equating the country with the president. But we know that if Trump is successful, he's tearing us down. He's erasing the middle class. He's taking away safety nets. He's putting a lot of people in poverty and hungry, and everything he's trying to do is negative. So if you want him to be successful, this is just my opinion, then yeah, I can't really rock with you. So
Right.
that's why people say, "Oh, let's keep the politics out of sports." And okay, to a certain point, I understand that, but I don't want him to be successful unless he's going to stop what he's trying to do.
Yeah, because success right now for him, Maryland just reported they had the most federal jobs lost, right? Just this past month. Baltimore is in Maryland. He just denied aid to Western Maryland for the flooding. We know how hard it's been raining here. So again, this is the president that you want to be successful. Again, that's hurting people in your constituency, right? Let's say Ravens fans, mostly in Maryland, and yet here you are, smiling and hoorahing this guy when people are actually hurting right now, Harold. So yeah, I just thought the optics were not good for football and not good for John Harbaugh or Jim for that fact, specifically.
Yeah,
I know, but I see him though. I got you, bro. I got you.
And again, I know, and I remember during Trump's first term with the Colin Kaepernick issue, and then we realized that there were a significant number of football players, mostly white, but there were a couple of black ones too, that supported Donald Trump. And it almost kind of makes you wonder, if you are a quarterback who doesn't support the president and you've got a left and right guard that do, are they going to let this 350-pound pass rusher crush my head? But and again, that's an outsider's view, but all three of you know the game is the game and winning is the most important thing. So yeah, we will have to see how that plays out. I do want to move on to yet another really important topic, and this WNBA kind of t-shirt protest that we saw last week about players getting paid what they're worth. Let me ask the dumb question, Kelsey. Why aren't the WNBA players making more money? And I'm talking about salaries and contracts. I'm not talking about endorsements, because we know that some of them are making bank, but then others not so much.
Yeah, I think people always forget how new the WNBA is, right? That's why we're so excited about this expansion and the 3 new franchises that were just announced for the WNBA. But all this to say, the WNBA players, and I love that they did this during WNBA All-Star Weekend, right? In Indy, 17,000 fans, right? You have the black shirts, and that became the biggest storyline coming out of the WNBA All-Star game, other than the stud buds. And if you watch WNBA All-Star, you know what I'm talking about. The live streaming viewpoint that was also shown during that. But
I guess I missed that one. But
stud
anyway.
buds, Harold, you got to go watch it. Anybody on social media definitely knows what I'm talking about.
I think I saw some of that. But.
And it was huge because it gave a new glimpse into the WNBA, and even had guys like the Barstool founder, like, hey, wait a minute, I feel differently now about the WNBA just through that viewpoint. So again, highly recommend folks watch that. But going back to it, I think for a long time people have just assumed that WNBA players were making what men players were making, and that obviously has not been the case. Now, to give credit to Caitlin Clark and the new people that she has brought in, there has been a lot more eyes on what WNBA players are making, even though this has been a subject long Harold talked about with the WNBA. But I think now with the leverage they have, right? You talked about, the new eyes on the WNBA, right? New viewership, new sponsorships coming in, for the WNBA as a league. And then you talked about how the players are also getting endorsements. And so I think the players are looking back at that 2020 CBA and saying, hey, wait a minute. And when they opted out, that these conversations were going to come, but they just want their fair piece of the pie because they are the product, right? That's bringing it in. So all that to say, I think the WNBA players are now just saying like, hey, we are showing that we're helping the WNBA make money, right? The fees now to join and be a member, right? If you want a team for the WNBA, have went up higher. Players know that they're largely responsible for that, Harold. So I think, again, they're looking at the times, they're looking at what they're doing, they're looking at the talent that's coming out of college right now and in the college women's ranks. And I think they're just saying, we truly just want, again, higher salaries, and then again, just better negotiating for what's on the table. So I'm excited for this conversation to happen.
But I guess my question is, I think we can all agree that they should make more. I guess my question is, why aren't they? Is it because the WNBA is so new, or is there another issue? Darren?
It's less money. The WNBA revenue is about 200 million. The NBA is about 13
It's a big difference.
billion.
Okay.
So what they got to negotiate is what percentage of the revenue do we get?
The revenue sharing. Mm-hmm.
Right. So they're not going to get the average NBA salary. It's like 13 million. The minimum is 1.2 million. The WNBA minimum is 66,000. It's not going to be apples to apples because the WNBA as a league doesn't have that big of a pie. So the players are saying we deserve a bigger slice of our pie.
Mm-hmm.
People get, when they hear the numbers they make, they're like, "Oh, that's an outrage." It's simple math.
So you say that it's just that the pie is smaller, and they want more of the smaller pie when compared to the NBA.
No, yeah, I don't blame them for wanting a larger slice of the pie, but we can't just act like the pies are the same.
Okay.
But the pie is growing, Darren. Right?
I was going to say
it's growing.
Yeah, they're estimated to making $500 million this year. All that stuff is coming out there, and then they're getting $2.2 billion from I think it was either ESPN or one of the networks that's covering them. So, to Kelsey's point, you're right. They're starting to grow, and I think we have to respect that and allow it to grow and allow and to market the personalities, because one of the things that Major League Baseball never did was market its players. Why a lot of black kids don't play baseball, okay? And so what the NBA and the NFL, especially the NBA, they were smart to market Caitlin Clark, to market, Angel Reese. They've got to do a better job of marketing their players, and I think it can work. But I also think, and this is just my opinion, Darren, y'all can beat me up right now for this, and I'll fight you and everything, is the fact that, the sports sections that I've worked for, I've had to fight to cover women's basketball at, when I was at the Philadelphia Tribune and I was covering Dawn Staley and them, I made sure we covered that team. And I still remember the day I was covering the Sixers game, and I was celebrating how Maryland's women won the national championship. And one of my colleagues said, "Chris, you watch women's sports and watch women's basketball. The sports sections have been a long time white male, sexist sections and whatnot that never, that never give the sport any respect. And so that has to happen too."
You know what, Chris? You make such an interesting point, because I don't watch basketball at all. I'm not a basketball fan. If I couldn't play it, I didn't watch it. I like baseball because I can play it. I like football because I got hurt trying to play it. But when I was a kid, basketball is just not my thing. NBA, WNBA. But that does not prevent me from having an opinion about, in this particular case, the WNBA. And that's why I'm asking these questions, just like women's soccer. Years ago when the women were going to strike and protest and all of that, because give me my money, pay me what we're worth, and they eventually did. And I think we're seeing the same kind of thing with the WNBA. I don't watch it, but I still think that they need to be paid.
If you make a profit, it's easy. People want to be paid right from that profit. And this is outside of the WNBA, right? If you're working with somebody and you contributed and they made some money off something you helped, wouldn't you want a piece of the pie? And I mean, that's this in layman terms. And I think the ladies are saying, look, we know for a while the league has been growing, right? And that the money had to keep being there. But now the money is literally there. And then, as Chris pointed out, the trajectory, Harold, is so bright for the WNBA. I was just yesterday, NCAA President Charlie Baker was here in town. I mean, women's sports is the talk of the town right now. We're going to have a brand new women's baseball tryouts in DC in August. Women's sports right now are growing at an exponential rate. But again, going back to the WNBA has increased numbers, increased people who want to buy into the league. And we're talking about more teams, more roster spots, just more good. And so I think the players realize If not now, then when, right?
Yeah.
So I think while the league is growing, they're saying this is when we also want to grow with the league and get our money.
I only have a few minutes left, but I think this is really important, and I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to talk about this. Something that I kind of stumbled upon in preparing for this show: the Black Sports Moms Conference in Houston last week. That to me is fascinating. That the Black mothers of these professional or prospective professional ball players are getting into the business. Darren, your thoughts about that real quick. Okay.
Where the dads at? Where the dads? I mean, that's fine. They got their little sorority. I don't want to say little. It's like a sorority, especially, NBA moms. That's fine. I am pleased to see that you see more dads in the picture on draft night nowadays than years past. It was like you would hardly ever see any dads. Now you see more dads on draft night. I'm glad to see that. So I don't begrudge them. I hate that it kind of plays to a stereotype about Black dads, because the Pew research said that Black dads are more involved, per capita than any others. So, we got to fight against that negative stereotype. But, I'm glad for the moms.
Yeah, but let me say this about that. Just because the moms are doing this doesn't mean that it is anti-dad.
I know.
So hush.
I would agree
Chris, your thoughts real quick.
Well, I'm gonna tell you something. I did a story years ago, and it's actually in the book, about a past president of NABJ. Her son, I was talking about Sarah Glover, and her son was at one time involved in baseball, and they were talking. I was interviewing them about the expenses. Another woman that I know in Philadelphia who was trying to get her sons into the sport, and I was just kind of going through, the expenses they had to go through, and especially in a sport like baseball. I remember one time I bought a baseball glove from the Heck Company for like $10 when I was a kid back in the 70s. Now baseball gloves are $300 and $400. And it's hard for Black moms and Black dads to, baseball gloves are like $200.
Yeah, they're expensive. Hurry, Chris, I want to get Kelsey in, so make your point, please.
Okay. No, I was just saying, I admire what they're doing. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and Kelsey, real quick, because this isn't a sorority. This is not a club. These are Black mothers who are focusing on the business
side of it.
Yeah.
I love it. Pause for applause. These moms are getting it done. Covered a Black Sports Mom Conference in Baltimore last year for professional athletes, but I love they're getting it done earlier. Let's remember where NIL is legal for high school athletes in certain states. And if anybody's going to protect their child, I think it's going to be a mama. Has Jaden Daniels' mom not shown us that here? Lamar Jackson's mom.
When she sitting next to Juju Watkins, she does not need to sit between her son and Juju.
Good for sports, Darren. Let the moms protect.
Hey, Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson had their moms.
I'm just saying, and all good. Black moms for the win, Harold. Black moms. Kevin Durant, Wanda Durant.
I wish my mother had tried to block me. Anyway, look, thank you all so very much. Darren Snyder, Chris Murray, Kelsey Nicole Nelson. I really appreciate it. Always learning something when I sit down for the Sports Roundtable. I appreciate your time. That is the Daily Drum for this Friday, July 25th. For News Director Renee Nash, I'm Harold Fisher. Have a great weekend. Good night.